All right. I'd like to start out by saying Barakatah Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. Welcome to another live lesson. This is just basically a various topics. I don't really have a actual title, but depending on how the spirit goes, how the spirit moves, if there's a particular topic to it, to this lesson, Lord's will afterwards I'll change the title afterwards to suit the lesson. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Earlier this morning on my way to work, I was listening to the Bible, and listening to First John, the book of First John. Then it went into Jude. Then it went into Revelation. Now, we've read Revelation many times. We've heard it many times, and something about the 12th chapter today hit me that never really hit me like that before, pertaining to Herod, and we know that Herod is an Edomite, and we've always said that the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, they were all Edomites that just didn't know that they were Edomites, and they spoke their different languages. And today, and they had this different customs, of course. And today, when I was listening to Revelation, the 12th chapter, which you're going to get right now, it was just one point about it that hit me, that proved, or it improves scripturally, that the pretty much the Roman Empire is the empire of the Edomites, which we already know that there's books written on it. There's information out there on it. But let's just get to it. Let's just click over and let's go to Revelation 12:1. It says, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars." Now, the Roman Catholic Church says that this is Mary. This is not Mary. Okay, this great wonder that appeared in heaven, this woman, represents the nation of Israel. Let's go real quick to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 6 and verse 2. It says, "I have likened the daughter of Zion to a comely and delicate woman." So this woman, this great wonder, this woman that was clothed with the sun and the moon on her feet, this represents the nation of Israel. Now the sun and the moon represent knowledge and wisdom, because Yahweh Bashem Yahushai gave us the knowledge and wisdom of his mysteries, of his truth, his laws, statutes, commandments, to the nation of Israel, to us, to make us shine above these other nations, beginning with the Edomites, so on and so forth. Let me get a quick precept. Let me see if I can find this one precept. Deuteronomy 4:5 says, "Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord Yahweh, Hashem Yahushai, my power, commanded me." This is Moses speaking, "that you should do so in the land whither you go to possess it." So what was that? The laws, statutes, and commandments of the scriptures that the Lord Yahweh Hashem Yahushai gave to Moses to give to us. All right. And this was our instruction book. This is what set us aside and apart from all different nations. Matter of fact, before we read on, let's go from there to the book of Deuteronomy 7:6. It says, "For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power." So what is holy? Sacred. Okay, so the holy people or the sacred people of the Lord are who? The Israelites, which another word for holy is what? Saint. And what made us holy? The law, statutes, and commandments that the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai bestowed upon us. It says, "For thou art an holy people unto the Lord thy power. The Lord thy power hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth." And this is why it is said in the book of Psalms 147 and 19, he showeth his word unto Jacob. What is his word? Law, statutes, and commandments, the Bible. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not dealt with any nation, and as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. And this is why we are known as the saints, because the Lord made us holy by giving us his words. Psalms 148:13. Let them praise the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, for his name alone is excellent. His glory is above the earth and heaven. He also exalted the horn of his people, the praise of all his saints, even of the children of Israel, the people near unto him. Praise ye the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. So what made Israel saintly or holy were the laws, statutes, and commandments that the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai gave to us, right? So that's what made us stand out from the other nations. Matter of fact, was there more in Deuteronomy 7? Let me go back. Okay, that was pretty much the point. So let's go back to Deuteronomy 4 and 6. Keep therefore and do them. What? The law, statutes, and commandments that the Lord gave us. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations. And they're going to see that, and they're going to see that glow about us, and this is why the Lord said to do and keep them in the midst of these nations, because this is what separated us from those nations. Those nations, their idols, remember, their idols are gods. I mean, their gods are idols. I said it backwards. They don't have a power like we have. The Most High created them, but the Most High is for us and not for them. So the instruction book that the Lord gave us, that was our wisdom and our understanding, and knowledge also in the sight of these nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. And this is why we read in Revelation 12 and 1, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, knowledge and wisdom, right? And upon her head, a crown of 12 stars, which proves that this is dealing with the nation of Israel, a crown of 12 stars. And when you go back to the vision or the dream, that was a vision that the Lord showed Joseph, his father, which was his son, and his mother, which was the moon, and his brethren, his 11 brothers, which were the 11 stars, they bowed down to him. And when he told them about the dream, they got mad at him. And even his father said, "What you think? You think me and your mother gonna come bow before you?" But he kept that saying in his heart, because he knew that Joseph wasn't exalting himself. He was just telling them what he had, as a dream, and that represented him being exalted in Egypt and them having to come to him for help. So this crown of 12 stars, this woman is the nation of Israel. It says, and she, being with child, cried. So what does it mean, she being with child? Meaning she was in an agony, and the consensus back then, let's go to Luke, the 2nd chapter. The consensus back then was they were waiting for the Messiah so that the Messiah could deliver them at that time from the situation where they were at, the oppression, the overtaxation, just the oppressive state that they were in the Roman Empire. This is Luke chapter 2 and 25. And behold, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon, and the same man was just and devout, waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. So everybody was waiting for the consolation of Israel, because one thing that Israel understood, even though they didn't accept the Messiah when he came, one thing they did understand is that once the Messiah came on the scene, then they would be delivered. First Peter 1:9, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. And what is the salvation of our souls? At the end, being delivered through the sacrifice that Yahushua made for us 2,000 years ago, of which salvation the prophets have inquired and searched diligently, because they were looking and searching for that grace that was to come to bring salvation. And they knew that the Messiah had to come, had to suffer certain things. And then after he suffered what he had to suffer, then the kingdom would come after that. But the only difference back then is they thought it would come immediately after he went through those things. They didn't understand it's going to take a process of time. It says, who prophesied of the grace that should come unto them, unto you, searching what or what manner of time the spirit of Hamashiach, Yahushai, which was in them, did signify when it testified beforehand the sufferings of the anointed Yahushai and the glory that should follow. So they knew that once the Messiah suffered, then the kingdom was supposed to come after that. This is why the disciples asked the Lord this question here in Acts, the 1st chapter and the 6th verse. It says, when they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? Why? Because Yahushua went through the suffering. So they thought that Yahushua was going to set the kingdom back up at this point. But this is the moment that all the prophets that prophesied and the righteous men were looking for. And this is why we're reading here in the book of Luke 2:25 about Simeon, this older man that was just and devout. He was waiting for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. And it was revealed unto him by the Holy Spirit that he should not see death before he had seen the Lord's anointed. And he came by the Spirit into the temple. And when the parents brought in the child Yahushai to do for him after the custom of the law, then he took him up in his arms and blessed the Most High and said, Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation, which thou hast prepared before the face of all people, a light to lighten the Gentiles, the Israelite foreigners, and the glory of thy people Israel, because you had those that knew that they were Israelites and those that didn't know that they were Israelites, which are called Gentiles. All right. So pretty much this is what they were waiting for the consolation of Israel. So they were in an oppressive state underneath the Romans, even though the Romans used to let them keep, the laws, keep their customs and their feasts and all that. There was still heavy taxation and different things that were going on. This is why you had so many revolts of Jake coming against the Romans and bringing coups or attempted coups against the Roman Empire. Them zealots and different variation of those groups or sects back then that were plotting to take the Roman Empire down, and the reason why they were brought down was because it wasn't time for that particular empire to fall. Because Yahushua said, if my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight. So seeing that Israel was in that condition, it says, and she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So they were waiting for the deliverance. They were waiting for the deliverer. They were waiting for the consolation. And this was all happening back then, prior to 70 AD. This was all happening prior to 70 AD. All right. It says, and this is the point here. Oh, no, not yet. It says, and there appeared another wonder in heaven. So when this appeared, when the nation of Israel appeared, and it appeared that they were in a bad state, and they were waiting to be delivered from this bad state. They were waiting for the Messiah to come to bring that consolation. There was another wonder that appeared. But before we read the 3rd verse, let's go to the book of Isaiah, 66th chapter, and the 6th verse. It says, a voice of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, a voice from Yahweh Bashem Yahushai that rendereth recompense to his enemies, Before she travailed, before who travailed? The nation of Israel. So before we were, matter of fact, let's look up this word travailed. Like when a woman is pregnant, she has those pains. The word is H2342, chawal, to twist, whirl, dance, writhe, fear, tremble, travail, be in anguish, be pained. Let's go here to the word travail. Let's see what goodies we can get online. Travail, painful or laborious effort. Because when a woman is pregnant, her body starts to change. She goes to the bathroom, throws up. She constantly has to eat. She gets, the baby kicks. Sometimes she can't get sleep at night because the baby's kicking, and doing all kind of shit. When she ready to sleep, the baby want to play and shit, jumping on her uterus, just doing all kind of stuff. This is all part of those labor pains and that curse that was put on Eve for going off, all the way up until this very present day. So the nation of Israel was like this baby that was, or actually like the woman that had the baby inside of her and going through all that anguish and couldn't wait for the baby to be delivered so that she can forget about her pains. Because it tells you that a woman, when she's in pain in the 9th month, she's going through all types of pains, birth pains. But as soon as the baby is delivered, she forgets the pain because a man-child was born into the world, right? So it says, going back to Isaiah 66:7, before she travailed, meaning before we went through those birth pains as a nation, she brought forth. Why? Because Yahushua was set up from where? From the foundation of the earth to be the Messiah. Okay? Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. And what was this man-child? Or who was this man-child? Yahushua. And it goes into it when you go into the book of Isaiah chapter 7, which a lot of these kooks use this to say that Yahushua was born of a virgin birth, which he was not. Isaiah 7:14, therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, the English language, they use one particular word for many different meanings. Like the word virgin can mean many different things. It could be an untouched woman. It could be a young woman of marriageable age, a maid, depending on the instance or the use of the word. Now, when you go to the Hebrew portion of Isaiah 7:14 and you look up the word virgin is Ilamah, which means virgin, which doesn't mean virgin, it means a young woman, but they had to throw the virgin in there, of marriageable age, maid or newly married. Now, when you go to the root word Ilam, which is where you get the word Ilama or Ayalama in the feminine tense or feminine sense, the word Ilam, H5958, means young man. It didn't say nothing about a virgin. It's a young man. So, and then right here it says properly something kept out of sight. An example, a lad, young man, stripling, a young man or young woman of marriageable age. It says a youth, a young man of the age of puberty. See? So this right here in the book of Isaiah 7:14 should have read, therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. Behold, a young woman shall conceive. All right? Or a young maiden shall conceive, or a woman of marriageable age shall conceive, or a woman of puberty. But really, literally, it should be a young woman shall conceive, because she was Mary was very young. She could have been anywhere from 13 years old to probably 14, 15 years old, somewhere along those lines. And it doesn't say how old Joseph was, but he was older. He was an older man. Could have been in his 20s, 30s. We don't know. It doesn't really specify what age he was at. Okay, so it says, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son and shall call his name Emmanuel. So this was a part of the prophecy of the coming of the Messiah. All right. So going back to Isaiah 66 and 7, before she travailed, she brought forth, before her pain came, she was delivered of a man child, because Yahushai was destined to come upon the earth before the foundation of the world, before anything was created. You know, it says, who hath heard such a thing, who hath seen such a thing? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day, or shall a nation be born at once? And this is what the Lord, what the Ezra was trying to tell the Lord. Look, can you just make everybody be that's supposed to be here, you know, at once, so that this thing can come quicker? And the Lord told him, well, ask a woman if she's pregnant, why can't she just bring all her children at once? Why does she have to do them like one at a time? You know? So it says, for as soon as Zion travailed, so as soon as we started going through all them birth pains, she was brought forth, she brought forth her children. Why? Because the children, which is the children of Israel, were delivered by Yahushai back then. Because Yahushai is the deliverer, the savior of the whole nation of Israel. But in this time, he's going to save the elect, and through the elect, you're going to have the 2/3 that are going to come back, because the scriptures tell you that all Israel shall be saved. All right. So at 1 John 1 and 1, is it the first chapter or the second chapter? It might be the second chapter. All right, let me try 1 John 2 and 1. Yep. My little children, these things write I unto you, that you sin not. And if any man sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Yahushai HaMashiach, the righteous. And he is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world, which this word world here is cosmos, which is an organization or an arrangement. So the whole world is speaking about what? The whole nation of Israel. But in this time, he's only coming to deliver the elect, and the 2/3 will come back through the elect, because the promise is Romans 11:26, which goes back to the Old Testament. And so all Israel shall be saved, as it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer. Is that not what the Lord said, told Moses, that, of your own brethren, he was going to raise one up, and they would come to him and hear him? It says, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. So all of Israel shall be saved eventually in the kingdom. All right. So as soon as Zion travailed, back in Isaiah 66 and 8, she brought forth her children, meaning they were delivered. Shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth? So the Lord is going to deliver us, because we're in the birth pains. We're at the final stages of the birth pains, where the contractions get closer and closer, and the pain gets overwhelming, and it doesn't feel good. So this is the point that we're at. So we're waiting for Yahushai to come back and deliver us. Okay, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem El Shai, shall I cause to bring forth and shut the womb, saith the Lord Yahweh Bashem El Shai? Rejoice ye with Jerusalem, and be glad with her, all ye that love her. Rejoice for joy with her, all ye that mourn for her, that you may suck and be satisfied with the breast of her consolations. And what is the breast of our consolations? The kingdom of heaven, deliverance, salvation. Because this is why Yahushua said, woe to them that are rich, for they have received their consolation. Their consolation is to be delivered from this situation we're in, so we can have certain dwelling places. We don't have certain dwelling places anymore. We're subject to payments. We're subject. Anybody could die at any time. Because we're living in the valley of the shadow of death. So these are all things that we need to be delivered from. These bad food we eat, this bad air we breathe, these bad water we drink. Just being in this world of nastiness, man. It's heart-wrenching that you may milk out and be delighted with the abundance of her glory. And what is the glory? The kingdom of heaven. Psalms 149. It tells you that the saints shall glory in the kingdom of heaven, because the glory is the kingdom of heaven. All right. So let's go back to Revelation 12 and 2. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So this is the nation of Israel at that time. during the time of the Roman Empire that needed deliverance from the hand of the Roman Empire, of the Romans, and the people or the men that they set up, over these different provinces. They were taxing the hell out of them, and if they broke certain laws, they would get crucified. And then you had certain ones that would rise up against the Roman Empire and fight against them, and then they would make an example, just like during slavery here in America, you know. Salaki, brothers. Here in America and on the islands and on the so-called Latin countries, when the so-called white men would come, if you had certain Israelites that revolted, guess what? They would kill a whole bunch of other Israelites just to teach those that thought about raising up against them a lesson, And there's been many revolts, and I'm just bringing up slavery because it's something that's fresh, or should be still fresh in people's minds, of those different revolts, and how anytime you was like the movie Rosewood, when they figured that one guy, was starting trouble, one Jake was starting trouble, then they will go and just gather up any Jake and just start lynching them. And then other Jake's like, man, why y'all gotta do all this stuff, man? You getting the white man mad, I mean, I'm not saying that's exactly what they said, but that's the sentiment. Why you getting these devils all roused up and they taking it out on us? And that's the same thing that they've done many times. So this is what was going on in the Roman Empire. No different. All right, now let's go to the next part. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon. Now, who is this great red dragon? First of all, it's red. Red represents the color of the Edomites, the so-called white man. And it's great because they had great empires that came and went. The last one being America, which is the 8th, is about to be taken down. It says having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his 7 heads. And when you look at this picture here, you have this the beast, the red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and then some scriptures say they had crowns on the 10 horns, and it represents the Greeks, it represents the French, the Spanish, the Romans, Germania Major, Germania Minor, and the British. That's the 7. And then America, which also is the harlot that rode upon the scarlet colored beast. This is the 8th kingdom, or the 8th head that came up out of the British Empire, because the British Empire is the mother of America. They're the ones that birthed America, and all these different nations, beginning with the Greeks, they all came out of each other, because they're all Edomites. And this is why it's a red dragon. All right, so reading back here in Revelation, and there appeared another one in heaven, behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Now I called it a great red dragon. So keep in mind, the dragon represents what? The empires of Esau, Esau's whole structure, beginning with the Greeks and ending today with America. All right, so keep that in mind. Dragon, great red dragon. All right, now 4th verse, and his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, because at that time, if we reading in the 1st verse that the 12 stars represent who? The nation of Israel, this woman. And we know that there's 12 stars. And we know that before the Roman Empire was set up, the 10 of the tribes had left under the Assyrian captivity and left to come over to this side of the world. If you're understanding and your eyes are open to that. Because when you go back to Jerusalem, the main tribes that were there was mainly 3 tribes, and then you had a sprinkle of the northern kingdom, but it was mainly 3 tribes, which was Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Which Levi wasn't a tribe back then, but they ended up becoming a tribe because Jeroboam kicked all the Levites out and sent them back to Rehoboam. Okay, so you had 3 tribes that were left in Jerusalem, Palestine, and those areas. So this is why it says, and his tail, whose tail? The great red dragon drew the third part of the stars of heaven. So they took the third part of the stars of heaven, those three tribes, and they had them in oppression and did cast them to the earth. See, because they were putting hell on Jake. You know, and they'll say there was really no sign that the Israelites back then were catching hell under the Roman Empire. Are you kidding me, man? This is what the scriptures say. You know, and this was before 70 AD. It says, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. I'm gonna give you brothers a couple of seconds to reflect on this. We read about the great red dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns, right? This is it, the beast, scarlet colored beast, 7 heads, 10 horns. America's the 8th, right? And then it goes on to say that his tail do the third part of the stars of heaven, right? And it cast him to the ground, right? And it says, and the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Who is that speaking about? One name. Anybody? This thing is bugging out over here. Anybody got an answer? Or who's this dragon that stood before the woman, which is ready to stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered? Nobody? Nope, not Yahushua. Yahushua is the child. Yahushua is the child that was born. Brothers are right. But who is the dragon that stood before the woman, which is ready to be delivered? Yep, there you go. The brother Sean Moore, Herod the Edomite. That's right. So this was Herod. Now let's prove that. Let's not just mention. Let's prove it. Let's go from there to the book of Matthew, chapter 2, and verse 1. Just bear with me 1 second. All right. It says Matthew 2 and 1. Now, when Yahushua was born in Bethlehem of Judea, so we're reading about the birth of Yahushua, which when you read the first chapter, it goes into it, and we're reading in Revelation about what was taking place during the time of the birth of the Messiah, Yahushua. So it says, now when Yahushua was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, so this is Herod the king, which is this dragon that stood before the woman, you know, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born, because these wise men saw the signs in the heavens, and when they saw the signs in the heavens, they were coming to Jerusalem to worship the Messiah. Because remember, we read that the prophets back then were looking for the consolation of Yahushua. They were looking for when the Messiah was going to come, so that then they can see the glory that would be revealed afterward, which is the kingdom. It says, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, which these were Israelites, because you had Israelites all over the place. Because remember, through the Assyrians, through the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians, the Greeks, you know, and up into the Romans, Israel was being scattered abroad. Okay? It says, saying, where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him. So as soon as Herod heard this, he was like, what? Because remember, Herod, who was an Edomite, matter of fact, let's get that. Herod, who was an Edomite. Matter of fact, let me see if it says it here. Herod, who was an Edomite. See, now at first this thing wasn't playing. Now it's playing too loud. That's all right. Herod, who was an Edomite, well, he was the king of the Jews at the time. So he's like, what the hell is this? You know, he didn't show it outwardly, but inwardly he was all messed up. And you had Uncle Tom Israelites back then that were all butthurt with him. Let's go to Herod. Let's see what it says. G2264, Herodes, if I'm saying it correctly, Herodes. Herod, heroic, the name of a royal family that flourished among the Jews in the time of Yahushua and the apostles, which they flourished, but they were actually around before that. Herod the Great was the son of Antipater of Idumea, and Idumea is a Greek word which means Edom or red, Adawam in the Hebrew. So we know that Herod was an Edomite. His father's line was an Edomite. So that whole Herodian line, whether they were called Agrippa or whatever, they were all Edomites. Appointed king of Judea BC 40 by the Roman Senate at the suggestion of Antony and with the consent of Octavian. So it was both Mark Antony and Octavian, which is Augustus Caesar. They both set him up to be king because he was trying to bring the last remaining ruler of the Hasmonean dynasty to sit up on the throne. I forget his name, and but he had him killed because he was trying to set him up as a puppet. Herod was trying to set the other one up, the Hasmonean king, as a puppet, but he ended up putting him to death. If my memory serves me correct. So they appointed Herod the Edomite as king of Judea in 40 BC. Okay, so this Herod here in the book of Matthew 2 was an Edomite that was sitting king, in Israel. And these wise men came and told him that they saw the star of the Messiah and they came to worship him. He said, when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled and all Jerusalem with him. So you had all these Israelites that knew that he was a king. They were all butthurt. They were all saddened because they heard that the king was born among the Jews. And that's the same thing today. That's what them same assholes said later on. What they say? They said, we have no king but Caesar. It says, and when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Mashiach Yahushua should be born. And why did he gather them? Because they knew, according to the scriptures, that the Messiah would be born. Right here it says, and they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. Now let's go to that. This is the book of, I believe it's Micah 2. And or is it? Nope, it's Salaka, Micah 4. Micah 4 and 2. Nope, that ain't 4. Oh, Salaka 5 and 2. Yep, Micah 5 and 2. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me, that is to be ruler or king in Israel, whose going forth have been from of old, from everlasting. So they knew. This is why that devil Herod called the priests in them and asked them where the Messiah should be born. And they said in Bethlehem. So he had his eye on Bethlehem from that point. All right, let's go back. And thou, Matthew 2 and 6, and thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And they sent, and he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. But this is all a lie, because he really didn't want to worship the Lord. He wanted to kill him. That shows you how carnal these devils are. When they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was, which this was an actual chariot, and the chariot guided them to where they had to go, where exactly where Yahushua was at. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. You have some clowns out there that say you're not supposed to worship Yahushua. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. All right. So Yahushua was, remember it says that He was rich, but for our sakes he became poor, because they brought him gold and frankincense and myrrh. They brought him all kinds of stuff, and plus his father was a carpenter, so that was a very lucrative business back then, so they were well off. And then this is what the Lord told the wise men. And being warned of the Most High in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. So here it is. Herod is waiting for these wise men to go see Yahushua, to find out where he's going to be, to come back and tell him. So he's patiently waiting. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. And this is what we're reading in the book of Revelation, the 12th chapter. All right. And I may come back to this, but I just want to go back to Revelation 12 and 4. It says, and his tail, which is the tail of the dragon, with the 7 heads, which is at that time was a Roman Empire, drew the third part of the stars of heaven, which was the 3 tribes that were there, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, and did cast him to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. So it's equating Herod, which we read in Matthew, that this is who he's talking about. For Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. He was equated with the dragon. Why? Because the Romans are Edomites. And so was Herod. Herod was also an Edomite. But the thing was that those Romans back then didn't know that they were Edomites. Those Greeks back then didn't know that they were Edomites. But the Herodian line knew that they were Edomites, because their line went back to Antipater the Idumean. So this is what hit me earlier. I said, damn, so really right here in Revelation 12 is letting you know that the Roman Empire is our Edomites. Because there's no coincidence that the dragon, the color of the dragon was red, which is the same color of Esau, which goes back to the name Edom or Adawam, which means red. So it says, stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, which is who? Yahushua, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And this was a gift that was given to Yahushua. Oh, and another thing, and I was listening earlier today also in the book of Revelation, the 1st chapter. Let me hold on to this just in case we come back to that. Matter of fact, let me put it over here. And let me go to Revelation 1. And this brought another thing to mind. That's beautiful, man. Revelation 1. Let me see if I can find the exact verse. Let's see. Just bear with me 1 second so I can see if I can find it. Right. Beautiful. Let's start here. Revelation 1 and 12. Hey, because what did the scripture say? Matter of fact, let's get that real quick before we no, matter of fact, let me get that. Let me get that. What is that? Isaiah. And then let me go back to this. Revelation 1 and 12. And I turned to see the voice that spake with me, because the Apostle John was on the island of Patmos, and he was seeing these visions, and he actually saw Yahushua, and he wasn't in a trance. I mean, he was in a trance, but he really wasn't. He was actually, mobile, like for example, you had Jacob, and you had Abraham and other prophets and great men of the Lord that were in a slumber, when the Lord showed him certain visions. But the Apostle John was wide awake, and the Lord was showing him these visions, So as he's sitting there, he's hearing a voice that was speaking to him, and he turned around. He turned his whole body around to look to see who was speaking to him. Right? It says, and being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks, which represented the 7 churches of Asia Minor. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, which is Yahushua, clothed with the garment down to the foot. He had a long robe, and girded about the paps with a golden girdle. He had a girdle around his waist. His head and his hairs were white like wool, which proves that Yahushua had white woolly hair, the hair of so-called Negroes when they get older. It says as white as snow, because his whole afro, his beard, his eyelashes, his eyebrows, his mustache, everything was white, completely white and woolly. And his eyes were as a flame of fire. And the flame of fire represented that he drank wine when he was on the earth prior to this. It says, and his feet like unto fine brass, and fine brass is a derivative of brown. It says as if they burned in the furnace. And if you take fine brass and you burn it in the furnace, when the fire hits it, you see that darkness that comes upon it, that like almost looks like burnt. That's what his feet were like, because they were very dark. And Yahushua was a very dark-skinned man. It says, and his voice as a sound of many waters, because he had a great, powerful voice. Now we get into the point, and it says, and he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. So when the apostle John saw Yahushua, he saw Yahushua in his full glory. This is why Yahushua said, Isaiah 47:6, 47:3, thy nakedness shall be uncovered. This is dealing with Esau, Babylon the Great, the daughter of Babylon. Yea, thy shame shall be seen, because Yahushua is coming back to reveal these devils. It says, I will take vengeance, and I will not meet thee as a man, because he's coming in that angelic, glorified body. And this is why the apostle Paul and different men said that I'll be glad when I wake with thy likeness, because if we're joint heirs with Yahushua, we're going to receive the same things that Yahushua received, and we're going to get those glorious bodies. Yahushua is that we all make it out of here. So it said, I will not meet thee as a man. So I will not meet thee as a man. So he was in a glorified state. So this is the glorified state that the apostle John saw him. He saw him in his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength. Right. It says, and when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead, because there was such majesty that body that the apostle John was in couldn't even sustain the presence of the Lord. So when Yahushua comes back, man, he's coming back very terrible, man. He's coming back very, very terrible. It said the day of vengeance burns in his heart. He's coming back. It's gonna be terrible out here, man. Like, we can picture certain things based off of the scriptures and maybe movies that we've seen, but when that day comes of deliverance, it's gonna be breathtaking. And when he saw Yahushua, he pretty much he fell dead, almost like he fell almost like he dropped dead. He said, I fell at his feet as dead. He had no more life in him. He had no more strength in him, So then he laid his right hand upon me, saying unto me, fear not, I am the first and the last. So this is when Yahushua comes back, man, he's coming back. He's going to be a force to be reckoned with. All right. That's right. I will not meet thee as a man. And shalom to the Akim on the comment boards and the Aqua that may be watching. So going back to Revelation 2:12-5, it says, and she brought forth a man child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And we're going to receive the same thing. This is Revelation, the 2nd chapter says that we will receive the same gifts with Yahushua, because we are joint heirs. It says, and her child was caught up unto the Most High, because eventually they crucified Yahushua and he went back to the Father. And when you read in the book of Acts, the 1st chapter, that's when the angels, the apostles saw the angels, and he saw the chariot pull Yahushua up into the chariot to take him back to the Father. So he left in style, and he went to the Father in style, and to his throne, because he sat on the right hand of the Most High until his enemies should be made his footstool. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of the Most High. And eventually, in process of time, during the time of later on in history, when 70 AD occurred, all Israel, well, not all of Israel, but there are certain Israelites that fled down into the interiors of Africa, and they remain to this day. But you had some that fled to India, some that fled to Asia Minor, some that fled to Europe, in different parts. You know, it wasn't a thing where you could choose where you had to go. You just had to break north, man, and just, you know, whatever way was open, you had to roll. So then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had the place prepared of the Most High, that they should feed her there 1,203 score days. All right. It says, and there was a war in heaven. Now this is going up in history, all the way up until when World War III happens, and Yahushua comes back with Michael and the angels. It says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, which the dragon is who? Esau, his military, his empires, you know, his beast system, you know, and they have a beast system. You know, I have this other information, which I guess I'm not going to get to it. Lord's will, maybe the next lesson I can go into it, dealing with Russia. One of the brothers has sent me a video on Russia, you know, and how because I was looking up some stuff the other day, and the thought came in mind to look up the old USSR map, you know, and then, you know, I was going to go through some precepts and stuff, but maybe Lord's will the next time. It says, and there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels and prevailed not. Neither was their place found anymore in heaven. Why? Because they're going to be taken out of their rulership. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. And we just found out in this chapter alone that this great red dragon is dealing with the power structure of Esau, because one of the heads that was still in power at this time was the Roman Empire. And you had Herod the Great, which is an Edomite, which the Romans are also Edomites. He was officiating the business of these Romans, and the scriptures equated him with the dragon. So he's an Edomite and they're Edomites. All right. It says, and that great dragon was cast out, because they're going to be cast out of rulership. All you have to do is read Isaiah the 14th chapter, you know, where it says, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? You know, then the Lord told him, don't let him fill the face of the world with cities anymore, you know, because eventually after the 1,000 years of hardcore slavery, Esau is going to be rounded up and burnt to a crisp. Okay, it says, which deceiveth the whole world. And that's all they've done. All you got to do is look at the history of Esau, man, the so-called white man. He done deceived the whole world. One of the main deceptions is that he has the whole world believing that the Heavenly Father and his Son and the angels are so-called white men. And that's blasphemy, man. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him, because all those planes and military and all that is going to be put down, because there will not be any more wars after this last and final war. After this last final war that the Lord is going to fight against Esau, which is going to be World War III, there will be no more wars ever in the history of man ever again. Isaiah chapter 2:2. And it shall come to pass in the last days, which we're in the last days, that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, because we're going to be established over all these different governments, these different nations and their governments. We're going to be exalted over them, because these nations, they look down upon us. And we don't just say that just to be saying that. We actually witness shit like that. You know, I mean, me personally, I've witnessed East Indian Elamites looking down upon me. I'm fucking Moabites, you know, shushing me out or wishing me out the way, like I was just a piece of shit, you know, on the road. You know, so these nations look down on us, man. On Jake, it says, and shall be exalted above the hills, and we're going to be exalted above the great governments and the smaller governments, because all these governments are going to come down and bow down to Yahushua. That's why he's known as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, come ye and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, Yahushua, to the house of the power of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, because all these nations are going to be forced to keep our laws, statutes, and commandments eventually. It says, and he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people. So there's going to be many of them that's going to be rebuked because they're heathens, but then you're going to also have Israelites that are in the midst of them that are going to be taken out of them. When you read Isaiah the 66th chapter, our sons and our daughters are going to be brought from far. It says, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. So these weapons that they have, they're going to take the weapons and create them into farming tools. Why? Because all these nations are going back into slavery where they belong, underneath us. All you got to do is read the book of Isaiah, the 60th chapter. It tells you about these nations going into back into captivity, and many, along with many others. It says, nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. So this final battle that we're reading about here with Michael and his angels, which is led by Yahushai, Michael being like the co-captain, and the angels fighting against Esau, his military, his planes, and all these different nations' planes, because these nations are going to be fighting too, but it's mainly Esau is the one right now that's in control. That's why it says that Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So there's not going to be any more war after this. That's going to be the war to end all wars. All right. So when I heard that earlier today, in Revelation 12, that kind of like, opened my eyes to, I mean, something we already know, but there's sometimes where the Spirit has certain things to be isolated, and you put and the Lord put the scope on certain points, and this is one way to prove that the Romans are Edomites, and also through Haman, which was known as Haman the Macedonian, and we know that Alexander the Greek was also a Macedonian, and Haman, who was a descendant of Agag the king, which Agag the king was an Amalekite, which is the top family among Esau, so there's different ways, but ultimately it's all spiritual, because you could go into the scriptures and go into the different characteristics of Esau, and see that who they are today just by a process of elimination. I mean, if the Spirit is working with you. All right. So with that, I hope you brothers have been edified. And to the next time, I say shalom. That's a good scripture there too, brother. Esau, future slavery. Who is this that cometh from Edom with dyed garments from Basra? Shalom.